The thoughts and the symbolic dimension are just an intermediate stage in the evolution of our psyche. The science recognition of the psychosomatic diseases shows where the development of our brain and of our psyche goes completely without our knowledge and will, too. The same as the brain grew from the anxiety to the thoughts without prehuman and human knowledge and will. Of course, this is not the only possible direction for the development of the human brain. And this time, again, however, we don't have to wait millions of years, because now it will no longer be a coincidence as it was when the transition from the anxiety to the thoughts was going on. Now we can maybe not plan the further path of our brain and psyche evolution, because it's impossible, but we can already observe the possibilities that arise, and we can support and strengthen those of them that seem extremely beneficial to us. The human brain is no longer just a chip in the lottery of evolution, but begins through the human knowledge, will, and consciousness to determine the most attractive direction of development. But we should remember that the brain is ultimately independent of thoughts, because that's the brain what creates the thoughts, not the other way around. Therefore, all intentions and plans that we could make for the brain are, however, to a large extent only a kind of a dream and fantasy. In fact, we can always be only half a step behind the brain, never half a step ahead. The human brain, more and more powerful with the acquired capacities, becomes less and less predictable. We can only observe the brain, learn from the brain, and use the acquired knowledge for the good of humanity. Many of us think that the brain is a passive instrument of the will, that it is something like a mechanical device that is used by the humans. This is a good opportunity to realize how wrong we are. Meanwhile, it's exactly the opposite. We are a toy in the hands of this strange organ which has achieved the perfection of operation incomparable to anything on earth, and who knows if also not in the whole universe. And the brain has not yet said the last word, because its development accelerates more and more, which doesn't mean at all that the human brain is hard-working. Well, not at all. As befits the Lord, the brain is lazy and unhurried. Mr. or Mrs. Brain, yes, the human brain is a completely independent existence. Your brain doesn't depend on you at all. You don't possess your brain. It sounds shocking, but it is so. Many, even highly learned people believe that a person's psyche is actually the same as the person's brain. Nothing could be more wrong. The brain is an existence. I'm even close to say that it's a being, completely independent of the person in whose head it's located. And first of all, it's independent of the person's psyche. Moreover, this compulsory, coexistence of a person's brain and the psyche is almost never harmonious. For everyone who is perhaps shocked by my thesis about the separate essence of man, his psyche, and his brain, I explain. The psyche cannot be the same as the brain because it exists in a completely different dimension than the brain. Namely, it's a symbolic dimension, while the brain exists in a physical dimension. One might say that perhaps the relationship between the brain and the psyche is analogous to the relationship between the physical electromagnetic brain waves emission and the mental phenomenon of anxiety. But it is not so. While we can really say that the anxiety is the psychic side of the phenomenon which physical manifestation, the spontaneous brain waves electromagnetic emissions are, so we cannot say that the brain is the physical foundation for the existence of the psyche. Many think so, but it's not. What is the psyche according to my theory of the psyche, then? The psyche is a process of a symbolic exchange with the environment. So the psyche, first, is not a static being like the brain, but a dynamic one. As I have written about it many times, the psyche is not. The psyche is happening. Secondly, the psyche, what I clearly put in my definition of the psyche, never belongs to a given person, but happens between that person and the environment with which that person has a symbolic exchange. So the psyche is a process that happens between people. Each of us somehow participates in our psyche, but is not even its majority shareholder. So it can be said that the psyche of each of us is happening next to us. But here some people may get nervous and ask, so where is the psyche happening then, if it supposedly happens next to us, when we think? After all, there is no symbolic exchange with the environment, then because the environment is not involved in our thinking. Is not this very question refuting such a definition of the psyche? Anyone who has already read my previous works knows that this argument does not only refute my theory, but on the contrary, is one of its cornerstones. For when I think, I am making a symbolic exchange with myself. Strictly speaking, this kind of symbolic exchange, which is thinking, is a beautiful proof that the essence of our brain is different than the essence of our psyche. Because in the act of thinking, my psyche finds even an interlocutor in my brain, as if it was a stranger, someone from the environment. And the brain is a stranger. This is why, in our minds, we have had so many times heated arguments and discussions, although nobody knows with whom. From now on, we know it. This is our brain, who is the interlocutor of our psyche.